I'm just giving you a little review of what I'm doing. I'm making this book box, which is from, as I said in the first video that I made, part 1, it's a wooden book box that was covered with leather, and it's empty inside. You know, it's something you put your little treasures in. And I'm going to take one of Beatrix Potters' books, The Tale of Mr. Tod, and I'm going to make a diorama of one particular scene in the book in this area. Of course, I have to sand this, I have to line it, and I will have to put the cover together too, and everything will go inside for the diorama. But I'm going to still allow it to be a book that can open. The title and the author will be on the spine, and of course the book plate on the front. Here's the scene again that I'm going to recreate inside of my book box. Mr. Tod and Mr. Badger. And I'm going to put Mr. Tod into the scene completely instead of just having his head. But I used these other images to begin to recreate Mr. Tod's clothing. And he has some breeches on that are at the knee. But the first thing I must do is I must make a wire armature for Mr. Tod. And I'm going to do this with chenille pipe cleaners and also some floral wire that's covered, and it's pretty substantial stuff, and some older pipe cleaners that I've had around just to give it a little more body. And they're smaller, so they're a little easier to work with for filling in some of the gaps. I'm going to speed this up at some point so that you won't have to watch the whole thing because needle felting does take a considerable amount of time. But the first thing I'm going to do is take out one of these floral wires and begin to bend the head part. But I have to use some kind of a measure because I do want him to fit into the scene correctly. And the reason why I'm felting him first is because he's going to be the standard for all the rest of the items that are going to go into that room. So I'm going to begin to bend the wires and the ears go in. Now these aren't going to be the final ears. These are just sort of posts I put in just to give it a little bit of a starting point and to have a place to anchor the ears. And I'm going to work down the body. And you'll see as it goes along. I'm just measuring out to a bit of the tail, and then I'm going to go in and begin to work the back legs after I get the body wrapped up a bit. I'll do the front legs first actually this time. I'm trying to stay as naturalistic in its form as I am able to. Beatrix Potter did make rather naturalistic looking characters, but she did take quite a bit of liberty with them when she put them in clothes. So, of course, a fox doesn't walk on 2 legs. So she had to make some compensation for the fact that he would be upright. And I'm going to take that into consideration as well. I'm going to try to make him as close to her character as I possibly can. And of course, it's difficult to do that because when you're an artist and you're working, your personality is going to show up in whatever you do. It's just the way it works. Okay, now the back legs are going to go in. And I know it looks really wonky and strange at this point, but I think of it as his little skeleton, and everything else will go on top. Now I'm going to put in the chenille pipe cleaners, and this does help quite a bit to anchor the core wool that I use to begin the body. And the core wool, which you'll see in a little bit, is a coarser wool, and it's a lower grade wool with a short staple on the wool, the fleece itself. And it's been carded pretty roughly, but This is essential because this helps you to anchor the higher grades of wool over it. And of course, once you begin to felt, you'll see quickly that the wool will attach to itself. Wool, each strand of hair and wool is similar to Velcro. That's why you can felt with it. It locks into itself. And that's why when you wash your wool and you take it from cold air to really hot water suddenly, well, it'll shrink because it'll cause the hairs to lock into one another. And or if you agitate it, it will do the same thing. So agitating it with a felting needle is the goal here. And that's how you sculpt with wool. Now we're getting the back legs in. And I'm just going to continue using this chenille craft, they don't call it pipe cleaners anymore. I'm not sure what's on the label. Chenille something. I'll always refer to them as pipe cleaners. My father used to smoke a pipe with cherry tobacco in it when I was a little girl, and I loved the smell of that tobacco. Now, myself, I've never smoked, and neither did my brothers, oddly enough. So, here we go. There's the tail, a little piece of chenille pipe cleaner on it. And I'm going to bend him a little bit to get his legs into the right position. Just to give me an idea, I'm going to bend the feet out a little bit, his paws. And of course, I've had this speeded up more than twice. And now I'm going to just take a look at him and make sure he's okay. Then just add the cotton pipe cleaner, the cotton chenille pipe cleaners in here and there just to reinforce it. Make sure that it doesn't get pulled apart because I will be manipulating this quite a bit. And there he is. Okay. Now, probably put a couple more of these in. Before I put the core wool layer on. All right. Now, I'm going to just do a few little pinches here and there for the nose and other places so that I can make sure that his foxy nose, which is very tapered at the end in the illustration, will accommodate that tapering. Now, these are some of the tools I use. I have two, you see that one with the sort of green and yellow, that's by Clover. This has five felting needles embedded in it. And this will help you felt very quickly. And you're striking it with 5 needles at a time. And this one is a little more precise. It has 3 needles. I use this one the most other than the single needles. And then I'll have this is a wool comb. Well, you can comb any fibers with this, but it was made for felting. There's a comb at the top with a lot of different wires, and then there's a little brush. And then these are some of the needles that I use. This is a star gauge, 38 gauge felting needle. And I don't use these quite as much. I use these usually to fill these felting tools that I just showed you more than anything. They're very sturdy. This is a spiral. The spiral needles are the ones I use the most of the time. I don't know if I can get it in there to... it's just not making it focus. But trust me, it's a spiral. And it has some little barbs on it as well. I'm going to show you an example of my work in the past with needle felting. But right now, I'll just show you one thing that I've done, which is actually painting with wool. And here we still have our little Mr. Todd skeleton. This is core wool, by the way, that I'm putting down, and I'll show you how that's applied in just a moment. I just want to show you what you can do with needle felting. It's very versatile. It does take some practice, and you need to learn how to mix colors. And, well, anyway, it is a worthwhile endeavor because you can sculpt and paint with needle felting. And here's one of the things that I've done. I've done actually 3 of these Madonnas. And it's not, I'm not doing these Madonna faces for religious reasons, but I just love the faces. And this is one from Botticelli that I picked out a portion. And I'm showing you the edge. I do it on this foam. Underneath is actually, I start with a piece of silk. And then the only thing on it that isn't needle felted is the gold embroidery. And that's done with silk for the crown and for the rays of light that are coming out from her head. And it's done after, as I said, at Botticelli. And I just wanted to show that to you real quick. I'll show you the side again. And it gets felted into a piece of silk, as I said, and then I layer it with various types of wool. I do start out with a core wool, and then I add the colors over the top. And that's one of the things you can do with needle felting. Okay, now we'll get into the core wool for our actual little Mr. Tod sculpture. And I have him there. And what I'm going to begin to do is just wrap it. And then just to hold it in place, I'll use some needle felting tools after I get a little bit of it on. And this is where this felting tool helps quite a bit. And with more than one needle. But I'll also use one needle as well. Here, I'm going to just show you what I do. And you get in there and just start hooking it in. And let me tell you, once you hook that in, it is very difficult to rip it off. But you can, and you can reuse it, especially at this point. So if you do feel you've made a mistake, you are able to take it off, but it isn't easy. It really locks in and the wool is very strong once it grips to itself. I'm just going to use a single needle here, my little spiral, and then I'll touch it up again with this, and I'll just keep going with that. I always start with the middle when I'm doing animals, but other people start with the head. Some people create the entire head and then put it on the body. But I found that doesn't work for me personally, especially if I want to pose the animal. It just, for me, it introduces a lot of different problems. I suppose if I was going to really make bigger sculptures, I might do it in pieces and then figure out some way to hook them together. But I don't tend to work really large with this sort of thing. I've made horses, goats, cows, what else? Deer, and fantasy animals. I've used it on doll bodies where I've actually felted over Monster High bodies and then sculpted those dolls into a different character altogether, little deer character, and so on. And maybe later on I'll show you some images of that. See there, I pulled that off and did it again. What happened is I actually put too much on, and I don't want it to be too bulky because the fox's legs are rather spindly compared to his body, and I want to keep that going. And now I'm going to just wrap some around the tail area so I can, after I do this leg actually, I have to finish the legs. All right. But you can already see it's starting to take some shape. And he's not going to be a white fox, so don't worry. I will add the colors, the better wool, over the top. And there's different grades of wool that you can use as you work your way up. And I'm just going to look at his face again and his body. He does have a very long snout, and but otherwise he has the characteristics of a natural fox, other than the fact that he walks on 2 legs and carries a cane and dresses like a man. So anyway, and then there's a natural fox I just showed there. I'm also using images of foxes that are from the woods. Now, of course, Beatrix Potter was from England, and she lived most of her time in London, but she vacationed with her family in Scotland and in the Lakes District, and that's where she grew to love the wild animals and the farmlands and the woods and the surrounding countryside. And I think that was the inspiration for her books. She loved animals. And later on in life, when she became a famous author, she bought her own farm and then began to purchase farms that were in danger of being lost forever as a conservation effort. And there's more about her. She was quite a complex character, actually. The movie, by the way, is pretty good about Beatrix Potter, the one that came out a few years ago. And I've watched it 3 times, I have to confess. I'm not sure how much of it is actually true, but I don't care. I love the movie. So anyway, and I love Beatrix Potter. From the time I was a very young child, I began to read her books in the early 60s. And I even took a job in our little grade school library so that I could read during recess rather than play outside with the other kids, because I wanted to read her books and of course others too. But I worked in the library my whole school life after that, all through grade school, junior high, and high school. I don't know why I didn't become a librarian, but I didn't. Instead, I actually became a gallery artist, and I work mostly in oils. And my artwork is actually quite different than my craft work. Hey, but I don't know why you can't do both. All right. Now, I didn't show putting on all of the outer wool because I'm telling you this is going to be a long video. But because this isn't really a how-to video so much as it is to get somebody started, to get you to be familiar with felting. I'm not going to actually felt the colors on his body because he's going to have clothes on. Now, he's not finished. His face has a lot of work to be done on it at this point. So does his tail. But I want to get him into the clothes before I do too much. I will do his eyes and his nose and his mouth a little bit, but that won't even be finished. And I'll finish some of the parts of his ears. And here I'm going to just make an eye. And I'm going to use wool. I'm not going to use a bead. Sometimes I have used beads in the past for eyes for animals, but this is going to be a really tiny spot of wool that I'm going to put in. And I'm just going to felt it first with that bigger thing, and then I may actually have to cut it with some scissors. Now, this is okay to a certain degree to cut with scissors as long as you felted it very carefully. And there I'm going to use that bigger piece, that bigger tool. And I'm going to get that little eye in there. I promise you. I'll probably cut it, as I said, and there's a top view there. I'll try to put it in. And it'll be really small. I mean, it's going to look really small at first. And I'm going to put a little white around the edge. And then I'll finish it off with a little black eyeliner with more wool. But I'm going to do this first, and then I'll go back and touch up the iris as I need to. And then I'm going to go on the other side, put that eye in, and do the same. But as I said, this will not be finished even at the end of this video because I am going to dress him first, and then I'm going to finish the felting job on the head, the tail, the hands, and so on. So I'm not being as fussy as I would otherwise when I make one of these sculptures. And I haven't stabbed myself yet today. Nope, not yet. So hopefully I won't. I'm trying very hard not to stab myself because I'll tell you what, it really smarts. But if you're asleep, it'll wake you up. These needles are so sharp. And you do have to be very mindful when you use them because otherwise, well, you'll find out if you do it. Anyway, so I'm going to keep going with this. I do have to do his nose too. And I'm just going to redo that eye, I think. Get it in there. Make sure that it's substantial enough. But let's get that nose in first. And it really, you'll see, as you felt, it really sticks. I mean, you have to repeat this action, but it will adhere very nicely. Just don't let the cat get it, or the dog. I had a felting project I was working on, and I was making a horse, and my cat got a hold of it when it was nearly done, and boy, did he do a job on it. I didn't have to start it over, but it took me many hours to get it back into shape. The cat had a lot of fun. But I'm real careful about where I put these now. I often will put them in a case because they are all wool too, so, you know, eventually the moths will get at them if you don't keep them enclosed. But I just love working with wool. Wool is wonderful. And I do spin and I do weave as well. And I don't have any sheep currently, but I do have some farmers I buy from locally, and that's always nice. I do buy off of a few vendors too, to get the really bright colors. I do hand dye some of the wool, but it's usually with natural dyes, and so it's not quite as bright. And now I'm putting the mouth in. And the mouth is a little tricky because the mouth is not a straight line. He has a sort of grimace. And we have to capture that grimacy look that he has. And this will take a few minutes. And then we'll do the eyes. And then I'm going to actually put teeth in him. And the way I'm going to do that, I will show you in another video, because he does show teeth. And there's that little divider. I'll do that better as I go. I'll just get a little bit of it in there just so you can see where I'm going. And this, by the way, this wool that I'm using is a really fine wool, and it is very, very black. I was trying to make my own black, and I was not very successful in dyeing my own black, and I ended up buying this, and it's been some years, so I can't really remember who the people were that I bought it from, or if they're still in business, but it was one of the nicest batches of wool that I ever had. I have quite a lot of this too, so I'll probably have enough for a long time to come. And there, I want to put that little grimace in, because he does have a bit of a grimace. In the actual photo of the book plate that I'm going to use as the diorama, he almost looks like he's smiling, but he's showing his teeth. He's very unhappy that Mr. Badger has come into his house without permission, and he's caught him eating his food and drinking his tea, and he's not pleased. And he wants to get him out. And you'll have to read the book to find out what happens. So, the book came out, I believe it was in 1912, The Tale of Mr. Tod. And as I remember back reading her books as a young person, as a child, very young child, I remember getting to Mr. Tod, but I didn't remember it being such a departure from her others. The other ones that I thought was a departure, and you can, correct me if I'm wrong, was the Tale of the Fierce Bad Rabbit, which was a very short book, but I thought it was quite cute. But now when I read it, but when I was young, I don't know why, but it disturbed me. But I still loved it. But who knows what goes on in the mind of a child. All right, now I'm going to put that little bit of edge around the eye. And there's where I'm going to use some scissors and cut that right off. This is going to take some manipulating. I didn't show you how I made the ears. I will show you that process when I get to Mr. Badger. But I do the ears separately, and then I attach them to the wires. And he's going to have a little more white around his mouth, and he'll have to have a little more around his eye too, but I'll get that at another point. I just want to basically get him done so that when I put the clothes on, I can finish him. Okay, well, there he is. Whoops, get that piece of fluff off. And in the book, he will be posed in the opposite direction in the diorama, just like that. And so I'm going to have his ear, that one ear is coming forward a little bit so that you can see. So there he is, and the next step will be to make his clothes, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to start that process. The first thing that I did for Mr. Tod is I designed the fabric myself. I went into Photoshop after looking at the images, and I made 3 sets of fabrics for him. Now, before I forget, this is what I'm going to make his teeth out of, his foam clay. And I'll show you that process again after I get Mr. Tod finished and I begin Mr. Badger. Now, I won't be doing Mr. Badger until the very end because I want him to fit behind the table and on the chair properly. But what this is a kind of foam clay, and it's very stretchy, but it's very rubbery when it dries. And so what I'm going to do is actually make the teeth out of this. Now, I'm fooling with it a little bit. I'm trying to see if I can make small fangs, but this is not going to work. I realized that right away when I started patching them on the outside and trying to poke it in. And besides, it's wet. It's not gonna stick. But I want to use this instead of polymer clay. Polymer clay is very hard, and I have used polymer clay for the hoofs on horses that I've made. But this, what I'm going to actually end up doing is flattening this foam clay out and letting it dry. And then I'm going to cut the teeth out of the flat pieces and then glue them on and then felt over the glue part so you can't see it. Because he does show his front teeth a little bit and he shows some of his back teeth a little in the image. And that's what gives him that grimacy look. And that's very important to put these teeth in. But I'm just playing with this stuff right now. I really like this stuff, by the way. I use it in a lot of other things. So, like when I make molds, I will push this stuff into molds and make flowers and things like that. Okay, well, here is my fabric now. I've cut out the pattern, and this is the leftover fabric. This is just for the waistcoat and the frock coat. He will have to have a pair of breeches, knee breeches. Then he's going to also have a stock that goes under the coat and the waistcoat, and then a cravat. And I will do those later, and I'll show those too. Now this I've cut this out on, this has been printed on inkjet paper after I made the pattern, cut it out. There's the pattern again, and I can reuse it maybe for something else, so I'll keep that. And then I took something called fray check, and I lined all of the seams, but didn't take the cut out patterns off of the inkjet paper. The fabric is still connected to the paper. And these are the pieces for the frock coat. And I tried to reproduce as closely as I could the image for the image that's in the book. And it seemed to be kind of a striped fabric. And you see that dark edge. Well, that will fade. Fray check actually makes it so that you don't have to sew the seams or cut with pinking shears, that sort of thing. It won't unravel. And it dries clear. But I'm just showing you this because I can't wait for it to dry. It dries. It takes about maybe a half hour to an hour, depending on the humidity, for it to dry. There's that piece I cut it from. This is going to be the waistcoat, and because it looks like the waistcoat is red or some kind of patterned red material. And I'll sew the waistcoat first, and I'll show you some examples of that. But first I'll go back and review what all this is going to look like so that you can see it again. And then it'll be put on, as soon as I get all of it done, I'll put it on in layers, but as soon as it's all done, then I'll finish Mr. Tod. See his knickers? Those are breeches. No, not his knickers, sorry. They're knee breeches. And then he has the coat on that seems to be kind of striped. I have to put pockets on the coat. I'll do that And then underneath the coat there's a stock, and then there's a cravat, and then the waistcoat. And there's the little pocket. And then there's another picture, but you can see the red cravat over a white stock, and then there's also a yellow, or a red vest or waistcoat. We call them vests, but they were called waistcoats in those days. And so I want to just keep it at that. All right. And let me move around here. There's where you see the red waistcoat underneath the frock coat. So, and then, okay, we're back again. All right. I'm going to start this process of sewing. By the way, when I was 4 years old, I went to a sewing school. That was 1959. And the woman who taught the sewing school, a little neighbor girl, and I walked there every Saturday morning during the summer. And I went for 2 years. She was 85 in 1959. And she taught me to sew, to embroider, and to knit. And I think she might have also taught me how to crochet, but for some reason I can't remember. And we worked on samplers too, but we made doll clothes for our Betsy McCall dolls. And I have loved to sew ever since, and I blessed the memory of my mother for having sent me there. At first I didn't like it. I was only 4. The neighbor girl was 4. By the way, she had the same name as I did, and she was born on the same day. Isn't that strange? Everybody always thought we were sisters. If you're out there, Debbie Sutton, I know your name isn't Sutton anymore. I hope you're still around. Remember the sewing school with that very old-fashioned lady who was born in the 19th century? Okay, now I'm going to peel off the fabric from the printer fabric off of the paper. I found that the cotton poplin and the cotton lawn inkjet fabric paper combination works extremely well, and the colors are very good. And it allows me to make doll clothes for my vintage Barbie dolls that I design from beginning to end, where I design the fabric and then I design the pattern. And I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. And for Mr. Tod, this is absolutely a wonderful way to try to keep the character in character with the proper clothing. Now, I'm going to start with the vest first, and I'll do some manipulation with this. I made this design myself in Illustrator, and then I made the other design in Photoshop, and I also used Procreate as a way to make these fabrics. Here's the fray check, by the way. It's by Dritz, and I buy this stuff, a lot of it, because for sewing small, especially like doll clothes and things like this, it's, the seams are tiny and you don't want it to fray. You can wash it up to 5 times. Of course, this is never going to be washed, I hope. Once this is inside the box, it's not going anywhere. His clothes are never coming off. They're going to be glued on after they're sewn on. So, but anyway, we'll get to that later in the process. All right. I think I've got everything here. And then I'm going to begin the vest. Now I'm going to begin to sew the vest, and I tend to use a lot of silk thread because I like the strength of it and the ease of it pulling through. And this is Coates & Clark's, and that's very old. I have a lot of vintage threads, and this is going to match perfectly with the frock coat, and this will do very nicely for the vest or waistcoat. And I always wax my thread when I sew. My husband was a beekeeper at one point on our farm, but we had to give up bees because I'm so allergic to them. I have to carry an EpiPen with me when I work in the garden. I carry it all the time anyway because, well, if I get stung, it can be a big problem. And some of the bees were quite aggressive, even though they weren't kept anywhere near the house. But they would always chase me around. And they did that for years. And I finally said, you know, I think I'm going to get stung one of these days and it's going to be terrible. And he said, well, I guess we won't keep bees anymore. I'm losing them anyway. We were losing whole colonies of them during the winter because the winters had been so severe here. And he said, well, maybe now is the time to stop. But we do have a lot of beeswax and a lot of honey. So I make these little triangles and squares of wax, and I use that to strengthen the thread. And all right, let's get going. What I do is I do use my machine quite a bit, but when I work small, I will tend to use a very fine needle, and I'll do a back stitch. And a back stitch is simply putting in a straight stitch and then going back through the middle of it, coming out the other side. This way it doesn't unravel, and you don't have these open areas that you see with a lot of people who hand sew. They'll do a running stitch and it will leave gaps. So this compensates for that. It takes a little longer, but it's stronger, and I'm used to doing it anyway, so. When I finish the end, what I'll usually do is I will go back in and I will stitch more back stitching back through where I've already sewn to lock it in, as you see what I'm doing here. And I just cut the threads off. All right, now one side's done. And then I'm going to finger press the seams instead of using a little iron. I do have a very small iron for doll clothes, but with this, it's very easy to just finger press it and it will stay. And I'll do that with all the seams, especially with this cotton poplin. It's a little stiffer, so it does have some sizing in it, so it will stay very nicely. The other thing I do is, how do I make a knot at the end? I just roll it on my finger. And because there's a little beeswax on it, it stays and never comes out. You don't need much beeswax, by the way. Just run your thread through a few times. If you're sewing on white, though, you have to be a little careful. Make sure that you scrape off any excess wax because it will stain a white fabric. I haven't had any problem because I always make sure that I clean the thread a little bit when I use really light fabrics. When I do put the diorama together, I usually will put all the elements in first, and I will not glue them in yet. I put them in with museum wax, and that way then I can decide exactly how the composition has to go. But I will be, after I use this is the particular museum glass that I use, after I'm done positioning everything, then I'm going to go back in and epoxy everything in so it can't be moved, or, unless you take a sledgehammer to it. Now what I'm doing is I'm actually sewing the seams down around the neck area and around the armholes. And I do that by cutting a little piece of the fabric all the way around the round part of the armhole and neck. I finger press it down, and then I just stitch it down. That way it has, an edge on it, but it's an easy edge to do. And you probably have a little difficult time seeing exactly what I'm doing, but there, you can see that what I've done. And I just cut that with the scissors just a little bit, press it down, and then stitch each portion of it down so that it looks nice and neat. Okay, there he is with his frock coat. There he is with his waistcoat on. I just have it pinned shut. Now, underneath that, he'll have a stock, a white silk stock. A stock is something that goes on before you put a cravat on, and that goes around the neck area. And it goes right up to his chin, underneath his neck, where you see there. And I'll put that on, and then I'll sew this little waistcoat on, and then the other coat will go over it, and then he'll have little knee breeches too. So, and he has a cane, which is kind of cool. And this is the frock coat, and the front, it will have lapels on it. I have facings for those, and it'll fit over this. And as you turn that, those will be lined so that they're the same color as the rest of the fabric. There'll be a facing, and then there'll be long sleeves. And I'll be working on that in this next week to try to get all of his outfit done, and then I'll post another video. And then I'm going to switch gears over to actually doing the inside of the box. And of course I'll have to touch him up quite a bit. He's getting a little bent out of shape from being manhandled, but that's all right. He'll be fine. And there it is. Mr. Tod. Say goodbye, Mr. Tod. In 1901, Beatrix Potters self-published her book Peter Rabbit. In 1902, a publisher picked her up, and her book Peter Rabbit became an instant success. She wrote The Tale of Jemima Puddle Duck, The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin, Peter Rabbit, and The Tale of Mr. Tod, the subject of this particular video. This is the end of part 2, and number 3 will be coming along at the end of the week. Please subscribe. Please don't forget to like, and please leave a comment. And don't forget to push notifications. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.